Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. All week we have watched our leaders hyperventilate about the threat other countries pose to our democracy. Foreign nationals seek to influence our election, they have told us again and again ominously. And by the way, they're right. Some countries do that. It's a fair point. But with that in mind, it was a little bit surreal to watch today as Democratic politicians in California encouraged foreign nationals to actually vote in our elections. It wasn't treason, they explained. How could it be? Progressives are doing it. It's a form of civil rights. In San Francisco, citizens of other countries, including illegal aliens, are now allowed to vote for school board. Other offices will not be far behind. You can be sure of that. San Francisco is the biggest city to try this, but the trend is spreading nationwide. In a number of cities in the state of Maryland, for example, foreign citizens can vote in all local elections. There's a push underway in New York City and in Boston to allow the same thing. Again, none of this is treasonous. It's not a hacking of our democracy. It's nothing Putin or Donald Trump would do. It is, New York City Councilman Jumaane Williams recently explained to us, quote, actually a restoration of rights. Non-citizens have been voting in this country longer than they haven't, end quote. Now, we're not going to pretend to understand exactly what that means. We have no idea what it means. We do know that the left no longer even pretends to believe in borders or in citizenship. They've rejected the notion that America is even a country. It's an idea, they tell us again and again, though really you get the sense they think it's more like a division of Amazon, staffed by faceless replaceable drones, meaning you, for now, and then your foreign replacement if you don't work eagerly enough or if you complain. Keep in mind, none of this is a threat to our democracy. It's the essence of democracy, somehow. Ian Samuel is a lecturer at Harvard Law School. Maybe he can explain. He joins us now. Ian, thanks for coming on. So,
hey, thanks. Glad to be back.
The reason that people are upset that Russia hacked our democracy, attempted to interfere in our elections, and I think they have a right to be upset about that, is that Russians aren't Americans. They're not citizens. And only citizens have the right to influence a democracy. That's what citizenship is. It's the right to do that, to self-govern. So with that in mind, why are the same people who are upset about Russia doing this encouraging other foreign nationals to vote?
Well, I think the reason is that it's not that people are upset that Russia is interfering with American elections because those people aren't citizens. It's because they're hostile to the United States. And long-term residents of the United States aren't in the same position. And as you quoted sort of at the top, voting by non-citizens is quite common, actually. It had persisted in the United States until the early part of the 20th century.
Okay, well, before we get to the history part,
I don't think it's the same thing at all.
Okay, it's not the same thing. So in other words, it's a matter of intent. So anyone who meets your definition of being not hostile to the United States, as defined, I assume, by you or other Harvard Law professors, gets to vote. So in other words, if Putin were to say, I'm not hostile to the United States, I actually like Donald Trump, I think he said that on stage on Monday, then that would give him the right to influence our elections, by your standard.
Well, the traditional test up until, I think, Arkansas was the last state to eliminate non-citizen voting in 1926. The traditional test was residency, permanent residency. And so, when Abe Lincoln was elected on the backs of lots of non-citizen voters in Illinois, which was true in the 1860 election, I don't think there was something illegitimate about that.
Well, we actually can't be, wait, hold on. We actually can't be sure what was true from the 1860 election because we didn't have the capacity to survey it in the way we do now. So what's your engaging in this
but
conjecture?
we know what the law was. We know that Illinois
really
allowed non-citizens to vote.
But we don't know what percentage of them voted for Lincoln. Okay, we don't know that. And I don't work at Harvard, but I know that we don't know that. So we're not going to pretend that we know that. But let's move to the present from the past here. Let's skip ahead, 140 years if we could. And ask why.
I'm an originalist. I like the past. What can I say?
Right. So, but why would it be wrong for Putin, if his intent was pure, to influence our election by the standard that you just laid out? And this is a sincere question, because I don't understand how you could be mad about Russian meddling and then you're encouraging non-citizens to choose office holders.
Well, I think if Vladimir Putin wanted to leave Russia and become a permanent resident of the United States, I would encourage him to vote.
But there's no such thing. There's no such thing as permanent residency for an illegal alien. He has no residency. An illegal alien.
Well, that's just historically, that's not right.
No, well, I'm not talking about historically. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. I'm talking about 2018, let's say mid-July 2018. How about today? And Illegal aliens are now allowed to vote in San Francisco. There's no permanent residency by definition. They're not residents. They're here legally, and they're allowed to vote. Why is that okay, but Putin influencing election not okay? Why is that not treason and hacking our democracy?
Well, I don't know how else, I don't know how better to put this. Like, look, as I said, I am an originalist. I believe that the central government should not be involved in telling states who can and cannot vote. The Constitution doesn't assign that responsibility to the central government.
Would you be okay with California saying anybody from Russia, any Russian intelligence agent who wants to influence our election, go ahead?
Well, I think I would not, but I would not
be.
On the merits, right? I would, of course I wouldn't on the merits, because I would draw the line differently. I would draw the line at residents, people who live in a place and intend to remain. A very common concept in our law.
But let's just be, as a matter of fact, since this is a news show, be clear on what California is requiring. There's no measure or test for residency. They're not saying you have to intend to stay in San Francisco before voting or prove residency in San Francisco or even be here legally. So what you're saying is irrelevant to the actual facts of this.
It's true that they may have decided as a practical matter to draw the line a little more over-inclusive, but I would note that everybody who lives in San Francisco for whatever period is subject to the laws there, and so it's not actually crazy to suggest that they should have some input onto what those laws are going to be. And again, that's historically normal.
So we just had a Russian intelligence agent arrested yesterday. She's now in jail without bail. Her crime, as described by the federal government, is trying to influence America without registering under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. What did she do wrong? She was a long-term resident of this country. She was involved in a romantic relationship with an American. She spoke English. She had a vested interest in this country, and yet she's in jail without bail. Would you defend her?
Well, I think that there's a great deal of difference between a person who is an actual spy versus a person who believes that this is where they live.
No one's alleging she's a spy. Hold on.
Sure.
No one's alleging she's a spy. She's not accused of stealing anything, of spying on anybody. She's accused, I read the indictment, and you should too. Okay. She's accused merely of trying to influence this country without registering. So what did she do wrong, and why aren't you leaping to her defense? Oh, because she's not voting Democrat.
No,
That's why, isn't it?
I think for as far as I know, she might. I have no idea. But what she did wrong is she violated an actual federal statute that prohibits, and perhaps that statute is unwise. But what is true is that the Constitution assigns to each state the decision to decide who is going to vote in that state's elections.
But beneath the statute is a principle, and you've changed the principle like 4 times. First you said they have to like the United States, but then you said, no, not really. Then you said they have to have lived here for a long time. No, not really. And now you're saying what? If you violate a law, so I'm sure you're for enforcing all federal immigration law. But you're not.
I am comfortable with the idea that anybody who is subject to the laws of the United States and resides here in the ordinary sense should have an input into the political process. And so in that sense,
well, then I hope you'll raise money for this woman's legal defense, because it sounds like by your standards she got railroaded. So,
I'll do it for free.
Free the Russian agent.
I have.
No, you won't. All right, Ian, thank you.
We'll
Good to see you.
Thanks a lot.
Don Rosenberg knows a lot about this subject. His son was killed by an illegal immigrant driver. He is seeking to use a voter initiative in the state of California to reverse a law that gives driver's licenses to illegal aliens. He joins us tonight. Mr. Rosenberg, thank you for coming on. So,
thanks for having me, Tucker.
Apart from the tragedy of your personal story, which, and let me just say, every time I read it, I feel sad. I was fascinated by this story because the pretext for allowing illegal aliens to have driver's licenses in California was it will make the roads safer. We now have some data on that. Tell us, did it make the roads safer in California?
Not in the least bit. There was also pretext that the drivers would be trained, that they would have to have insurance to get a license, and hit and runs would decrease. There's nothing in the law that requires them to get trained. There's nothing in the law that forces them to get insurance. All you have to do is show up in a car that's insured and then go home and drive your car that isn't. Hit and runs are up in the first 2 years. I have the third-year data, but I haven't put it together yet. Hit and runs are up 26.4%. That's over 26,000 in the first 2 years, and traffic fatalities in the first 3 years are up over 16%, which is equal to about 1,200, a little over 1,200 people. So I would hardly call that the roads are safer.
So actually the opposite has happened. And by the way, nationally, highway deaths are falling. As you know, the roads are safer in a lot of the country. But in California, which allows illegals to have driver's licenses, it's gotten more dangerous. Do officials in California who predicted the opposite, have they apologized? Are they concerned about this?
They either don't talk to me, or one politician actually threatened me last week that I shouldn't go forward. A guy named Gil Cedillo. He used to be in the Assembly and the Senate. He's now a city council member in Los Angeles. And,
Gil Cedillo threatened you.
Yeah.
What did he say?
He said you don't want, and it's in writing. I mean, it was in a story. He didn't talk to me specifically, but he just said that I shouldn't poke the hornet's nest. I'll send you the story later so you can see the exact words.
What do you think he meant by that?
Well, I think what he meant was that if I go forward with this, they're going to do even crazier things than they've done when it comes to illegal immigrants and their so-called rights. And I looked at it as, you're not threatening me, you're threatening the state, because every time you do something that supposedly helps illegal immigrants, it hurts everybody who lives here, who's a citizen or a legal resident. So you're not threatening me, you're threatening the whole state.
It's really one of the saddest, most backward stories I've ever seen. Don Rosenberg, thank you for coming on and sharing that. It's unbelievable. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Tucker. Appreciate it too. Bye-bye.
We have coming up exclusive reporting done by this show on a major story pertaining to the Russia investigation. Pretty amazing. That's next. Several months ago in this show, we broke the story of Tony Podesta's lobbying for Ukraine. Podesta, of course, is the founder of the now defunct Podesta Group, which for years was one of the biggest Democratic firms in Washington. He's also the brother of Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta. He's also a close friend and a major fundraiser for Bill and Hillary Clinton. Now, the Podesta Group, we reported, worked with Paul Manafort to lobby on behalf of Ukrainian interests in the United States without properly registering at the time under the Foreign Agent Registration Act, which is called FARA. Manafort got in big trouble for that. He's now being held in solitary confinement, and he's looking at a life sentence behind bars. And Tony Podesta? Whatever happened to him? Well, tonight we can report exclusively, based on two separate sources we spoke to today, that Tony Podesta has been offered immunity by Robert Mueller to testify against Paul Manafort. In other words, for a near identical crime, Bill and Hillary's friend could skate and emerge completely unscathed, while Paul Manafort may rot in jail. Only one of them made the mistake of chairing Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Maybe the most amazing is the pretext under which all of this is happening. The FARA law was passed back in 1938 in order to prevent the Nazi government from lobbying in the U.S. Over a 50-year period, from 1966 to 2015, a total of only 7 people were criminally charged under FARA. Many more could have been charged. Washington is brimming with unregistered foreign agents and has been for decades. And yet only 7 people were charged over 50 years. And yet in recent months, 3 people have been charged under FARA. What do they have in common? You guessed it, some connection to Donald Trump. Federal laws ought to be enforced. Unlike the left, we actually believe that. But they must be enforced equally, or they're not laws at all. They're political cudgels and tools of social control. They become illegitimate and scary. In this case, ought to make you nervous. Well, John Brennan, of course, ran the CIA under Barack Obama. Now he's a cable news shouter, a paid analyst for MSNBC who insults Donald Trump and advocates for the Democratic Party. Brennan no longer works for the federal government in any capacity. He holds no official post. And yet, according to 2 sources we spoke to exclusively today, Brennan retains perhaps the most valuable asset he had in government, a top-secret security clearance. This allows him to do what the rest of us cannot do: view classified government documents and, more critically, discuss classified topics with intelligence officials still working in government and then leak that information to the press. This is an awesome power. Our intelligence agencies keep America's most sensitive secrets. They hold highly personal information on every American, including you. It is terrifying to think that John Brennan still has access to any of that information. Brennan is an out-of-the-closet extremist. This week, he accused Donald Trump of treason, a death penalty offense. On Tuesday, he suggested it would be reasonable for the intelligence agencies to conceal information from the president. That's a violation of their charter and a violation of federal law. On Twitter, Brennan routinely makes florid threats, addressing his tweets directly to the president like a crazy person. Earlier this year, for example, Brennan wrote this, quote, "When the full extent of your venality, moral turpitude, and political corruption becomes known, you will take your rightful place as a disgraced demagogue in the dustbin of history. America will triumph over you." You could almost hear his fingers smashing the keyboard. Not a stable man. Brennan is also a passionate ideologue with a documented history of dishonesty, and not just a little bit, a lot. As CIA director, he lied about spying on Senate staffers, which the CIA did, and about killing civilians with drone strikes. He lied about the Steele dossier, famously. In 2010, he prevented the CIA from referring to Islamic militants as jihadists because, and we're quoting now, "Jihad is a holy struggle and a legitimate tenet of Islam." This is not a man who should have a security clearance. We called NBC News today to ask if Brennan has revealed classified information on their air, or whether he's passed that information to his colleagues at NBC. NBC did not respond. But Brennan is not the only reckless partisan with a history of dishonesty who retains a government security clearance. Jim Clapper, the former director of national intelligence, appears to have one too. Same with Michael Hayden, another former CIA director. Hayden recently suggested the president is carrying out a second Holocaust on the Mexican border. In case you're wondering how classified information winds up in the media on a near-daily basis, the New York Times story this morning, all of it designed to undermine the elected president and bolster the Democratic Party, now you have some sense. You hate to think the deep state is real, that there's a permanent government that operates independently of voters and of democracy itself. But as long as guys like this have security clearances, honestly, you've got to wonder. Senator Rand Paul represents the Commonwealth of Kentucky. He is worried about this. We talked to him about it a short time ago. Senator, thanks for joining us.
Sure.
John Brennan is an irresponsible partisan combatant who works for a cable news channel and has threatened the president on Twitter. Why in the world would he have a top secret federal security clearance?
Now, this is alarming. And if John Brennan still has top secret clearance, can he research Donald Trump? Can he research his family? Can he type my name into computer search engines? Can he look at all of my information? It's alarming. If he has top secret clearance, as unhinged as he is now, calling the president treasonous, saying basically that he's for, the death penalty for the president. Yeah, it's alarming. If he has security clearance, it's absolutely alarming.
So we've spoken to knowledgeable sources on this question who say he does. We tried to confirm that with the CIA. They refused to comment on it. We asked NBC, his employer. They refused to comment on it. We believe it to be true. What would prevent him from speaking to current employees of the CIA or other intelligence agencies and getting information, secret information from them that could be leaked to the press or used against his political opponents?
Right. Well, John Brennan has a history of leaking information already, not only for political reasons, but a few years ago he linked that there was an inside informant in Yemen while that person was still on the inside in Yemen. He put that person's life at risk. They all backpedaled, and they had to rescue someone out of Yemen who was at the heart of an al-Qaeda, project trying to discover what al-Qaeda's plans were in Yemen, but John Brennan leaked their name. So he's got a history of having a problem with leaking. Head of the CIA, who in their right mind would want to let him have the power still to search through everybody's records?
But he's a private citizen who works for a cable news station. Could I get a top secret security clearance and find out government secrets and use them in the course of my job? I mean, what is this?
No, I think it's completely crazy, and I think the idea that he could be passing secrets to the media, yeah, that's alarming. And then,
what can be done?
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to send a letter not only to the president asking whether he still has clearance, which I think the president might be interested in this issue. I'm sending the letter also to Sessions and also to Dan Coats, who's over all of the intelligence. So we are going to press the case, and we're going to find out, does John Brennan still have clearance, and really should a person who has called the president treasonous have top secret clearance?
Or threatened him. But it's not just Brennan. It is potentially, and we believe it is also Clapper, Susan Rice, people who are active active participants in current partisan warfare,
right,
shouldn't there be some mechanism to prevent people who are engaged in partisan warfare from having top secret
clearances? And this is something I've advocated for years, and that's to have oversight of the intelligence community by having judges grant warrants. So they would have to go to a judge to have permission to look at a database. I don't want them researching Donald Trump's political supporters, their records, their bank records, their phone records. The way to stop it is to have an overall reform. And in fact, I'm going to talk with the president on Monday, and we're going to ask the president, will you institute a rule, a new rule at the FBI that says they cannot search these foreign databases for Americans' material without asking a judge for permission?
Thank you for doing that. I'm sorry it's taken this long for someone to do something about it. I'm glad you are. Senator, thank you.
Thank you.
Campaign to abolish plastic straws, one of the scourges of this country, is now sweeping America. We've got an anti-straw advocate. They exist, and he joins us next. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's the word, as you know. And according to some, a flagrant injustice is unfolding in restaurants across America: plastic straws. Some say the billions of plastic straws Americans use every year are harmful to nature, turtles specifically, and they ought to be eliminated. Many restaurants are now supplying straws only by request or eliminating them altogether. In Seattle and Santa Barbara, plastic straws are banned. You can be fined or go to prison for distributing them. Dune Ives is executive director of Lonely Whales, which supports the anti-straw campaign, and she joins us tonight. Dune, thanks for coming on.
Tucker, thanks for having me.
Maybe unlike some people, I don't think it's crazy to worry about what plastic does to sea animals, and I'm really bothered by the effect that straws have on turtles. Honestly, I mean, it sounds maybe dumb to some of our viewers. I don't like that. I guess what bothers me is the solution. Now, the overwhelming majority of plastic waste in the ocean does not come from the United States. We're not a big littering country. It comes from Asia, as you know. So why not put pressure on the Asian countries that are dumping this crap into the oceans and leave American restaurant diners alone?
Well, Tucker, first, it's really a pleasure to be on the show to talk with you about plastic pollution. And you're right, America is in the top 20 of polluters of plastic when compared to all the other countries around the world.
Yeah.
We should be focusing everywhere at the same time. So our campaign, when we started it just 2 years ago, it wasn't an anti-straw campaign. It was really intended to raise awareness about the state of plastic pollution, not just in the United States, but elsewhere. And since we've launched it, we've had requests from folks in India, Indonesia, Taiwan, Vietnam, even in China, which might be a surprise, but even in China to say, well, what can I do about the plastic pollution crisis? Not necessarily the straw, but really the plastic pollution crisis overall.
And again, I think I'm kind of for that. I guess what bothers me is the emphasis. So threatening diners or restaurants in Santa Barbara with jail time if they give out straws, probably less effective than saying to China, hey, you're just spoiling the earth, comma, which they are, comma, and nobody ever says anything about it because they're like a third world country and we feel super guilty and we can't tell them what to do. But they're responsible for the bulk of the pollution in the world, and you guys never say anything about it. Why is that?
Well, we actually do say something about it, and what was interesting about what China just did this last year is they said, no thank you to developed countries' trash anymore. They said, stop sending it to us. We're not going to take it anymore. You're going to have to deal with it yourself. And so cities across the United States, as well as in UK, are starting to scramble a little bit to figure out, well, where do we then send it? Do we send it to Vietnam? Do we send it to Malaysia?
Wait a second.
No, I'm not
that
saying
was
that
an interesting sleight of hand. So China is somehow environmentally aware because it blames its environmental degradation, its environmental crimes on the United States. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think I said that. But what I did say is that for a long time, the United States and other countries have been sending our waste elsewhere for them to deal with it, either to recycle it or to incinerate it.
But the fact is, I don't know if you've traveled internationally quite a bit, but
I have.
Littering is not an American problem. You go to the Middle East, you go to Asia, you go to Russia, people throw stuff out the window. They throw it off their boats, they throw it off their docks, they pollute in a huge way. And American environmental groups, which are totally PC, as you know, refuse to say anything about it because they're not Western. So it's considered bigoted or something to point out that, like, litter's bad no matter who does it. Do you see what I'm saying? Will you admit that? Because it's true.
Well, I do think so what I will admit is that we've got a problem with trash globally. So in the United States, I don't know if you knew this, only 9% of our trash is recycled on an annual basis. That's held steady since the year 2012. So we have work to do in the U.S. Of course, there's work to do elsewhere as well. And what we're really excited about right now is seeing the awareness from policymakers, from corporations on a voluntary basis. Not on a mandatory basis where people are saying this is what you should do, but others are stepping forward and saying we have to do something. We all have a part to play in this.
But by something though, I mean, let's be, again, I kind of met you more than halfway by saying I actually hate pollution, I hate littering,
right.
I hate filth, yep. And I don't think you should hurt animals if you don't have to. I really believe that, okay? So I conceded that. But let's just be real for a second. Of all the problems that we face, like 50,000 people died of opioid ODs last year. Are straws in Santa Barbara really kind of in the top 100 problems? Like, why aren't we focusing on the things that matter most?
Well, I think focusing on plastic pollution now is important to do. We're expected to see an increase in plastic production and still not an increase in waste management infrastructure globally over the next 10 to 15 years. It's only going to get worse, Tucker. And as you know, as a fisher, the last thing you want to do is you want to see plastic pollution in the waters where you fish.
Okay, but honestly, the law of unintended consequences cannot be repealed. So if you ban straws, companies start making plastic sippy tops, which use more plastic than the straws did. So maybe that's not a success, right? Okay, so, I mean, short of like banning drinking except out of your hands, what's the solution there?
Well, then we would all need plastic bibs to be able to protect our clothes, and that wouldn't be part of the solution either, would it? What I'm really excited for, there are companies like Dell Corporation, Human Scale, Interface, others that actually are working with countries like Indonesia and Chile and even in the Philippines to say, how do we take all of that plastic waste that's on your beaches, on your riverbeds, and your shorelines, and how do we help you build infrastructure and then take that waste product and actually turn it into chairs or turn it into carpet tiles?
If somebody comes to, really quick, we're almost out of time, but this is a personal obsession of mine. If someone comes to our country from another country and gets caught littering, like dumping a trash bag out the window, why wouldn't we deport that person, honestly?
Oh, gosh, I mean, I feel like we should deport people who do that anyways, who are U.S. citizens. We all should care for this country, right?
Well,
if you're a citizen or not,
semi-agree with that. But the ones that we can deport, why don't we actually deport? And I'm not joking. Come to our country and you litter, which a lot of people do. Why don't we put up with that exactly, do you think?
I'm worried about my neighbors. I walk down the streets of Seattle and I see way too many cigarette butts in the street, Tucker. What are we going to do about that problem? And those are U.S. citizens.
Smoke unfiltered. June, thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Russia's the real threat to America. That's ridiculous. It is China. You know that. Our policymakers know it. They lie about it. Next, we'll discuss the routine theft by China of U.S. private sector and government research. It's huge, and we'll tell you how huge next. China has proven to be a much more formidable adversary than, say, Russia over the past 3 decades. And Congress finally seems to be taking notice of that. Today, the House Intelligence Committee held a hearing on Chinese espionage and how it threatens private actors and the U.S. government. James Phillips is chairman and CEO of NanoMac, Inc., and testified at that hearing, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Phillips, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So you run a high-tech manufacturing company in the United States that makes a bunch of different things, some of them for the U.S. government.
Yes.
Tell us how you have experienced the threat from China to our private sector.
Well, we are a deep science manufacturer. We make things that nobody else can make anywhere in the world. And, you know, one day, not very long ago, the FBI just showed up at our door and said, you know, you're the most hit firewall in the southern United States by China. And they're hitting you millions of times a day on your firewalls, and you need to look out for it. And so there was a thing under the Bush administration called the National Nanotechnology Initiative to protect nano, because nano is so important to the U.S. It undergirds all manufacturing. And as we try to reclaim manufacturing in the United States, it really all starts with nano. It doesn't matter whether it's AI or any of the new technologies, big data that you read about. Nanoscience is somewhere there, especially in medicine, things like that. And so it needs to be protected, and it caught us by surprise, but luckily we already had 2 firewalls. But at the end of the day, after looking at it really, really closely. They said, as much as we've helped you now protect, I kind of turned over my entire firewall to the FBI, and they've still got it, and to that extent it's protected, but they said, you almost have to go and put everything in your logbooks that you really want to protect, your really super secret stuff. If you're coming up with gravity-resistant materials to make things that are just really futuristic, whatever, do not put that on the grid. So we take a lot of stuff now off the grid. It's kind of like Back to the Future. You go back in time.
You're putting it in notebooks.
Yeah.
Is there any country that approaches China in the scale of the theft or in its aggression?
There's nobody even close. I hear this Russia, Russia, Russia. I mean, Russia, to a great extent, is Mexico with nukes. I mean, they've got a small, GDP. I mean, China realizes the way to take over the world, the way to take over the United States, which they've publicly claim they want to do and be the #1 country in the world in all respects, is through innovation, through science and jobs. And that creates GDP, which they're the fastest growing GDP in the world. And it holds true no different than it did 100 years ago. The person with the most gold is in charge.
Of course. Always. Mexico with nukes. I wish you told me that earlier. I would quote you every night, but I plan to from here on out. James Phillips, thank you. That was really interesting.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Gosh. Robert Mueller's investigation continues to widen in its thus far unsuccessful quest to find collusion with Russia in 2016. Eric Prince founded Blackwater USA. Recently, the Mueller team took possession of his communications. Eric Prince joins us tonight for a recap of what happened. Eric, thanks a lot for coming on. Why would they take control of your communications devices?
Nice to see you, Tucker.
Nice to see you. Thanks. What's that about?
It was all part of their investigation. This was actually many months ago, and I haven't heard anything from them for months, so I assume their interest in me has long passed.
Huh. So, but have you received your devices back?
Yes, I had them back within a matter of days.
Is there any suggestion that they think that you colluded with Russia in some way?
No, certainly not.
Okay. I want to talk to you also because I've been emailing with you about this, and I think you're a legitimate authority on the question of Afghanistan. And it's one of those stories, it's a war, of course, an occupation, that gets very little attention. And I'm interested to know how you think we should proceed in Afghanistan, since you have deep knowledge of that country.
Well, Tucker, this year we're spending as a country more than the entire UK defense budget, or even more than the entire Department of Homeland Security, $62 billion just in Afghanistan. Americans are still dying there now that were infants when the Twin Towers came down. So we're entering our now multi-generational war, which is a first for America. And the more pressure the president puts on Iran over its nuclear program means the more that Iran will continue to subvert the legitimate government in Afghanistan. So we should take a smaller, unconventional approach, just like the U.S. went into Afghanistan with right after 9/11. And the problem is, within months of that, we switched to a very conventional approach, like the Soviet Union did, and we've been going backwards ever since, having spent trillions of dollars and having lost thousands of Americans. So you go to a small, special operations led, with some contracted presence there. Right now there's 15,000 U.S. forces and another 30,000 contractors. My plan takes it down to 2,000 U.S. forces and 6,000 contractors with a significant savings, more than $50 billion in savings, real money even in Washington. And this would put us on a very sustainable path to outlast the Taliban and the ISIS forces that are there.
I don't even know what the counter-argument would be, but I appreciate your bringing that to public attention, and I hope you continue to do it. Eric Prince, thank you very much. Time now for Final Exam. Question is, can you beat the experts at remembering the strange and obscure things that happened this week? There were a lot of them. Find out next. Thank heaven it is time now for Final Exam, our fact-heavy after-dinner mint, and you have earned it this week. We, of course, pit hardened news professionals against one another to determine who's been paying closest attention to the news this week. Our defending champion is, of course, Katie Pavlich of Town Hall. She has killed opponent after opponent this week. Her challenger, Guy Benson, host of Benson and Harp, a very good competitor himself. You can hear him on Fox News Radio every day. You both know the rules, but I'm going to repeat them for our audience who might be tuning in for the first time in a while. Hands on buzzers. I ask the questions. The first one to buzz in gets to answer the question. You have to wait until I finish asking it in order to answer. You can answer once I acknowledge you by saying your name. Each correct answer worth 1 point. Each incorrect answer detracts a point from your total. Best of 5 wins. Are you ready?
Ready.
We are.
Okay, I know you are. You look a little nervous. That's okay. You should be nervous. Question 1. A man in New York City set a dangerous world record recently for speed slicing of a type of fruit. He did it on his stomach using a machete. He chopped his way through 26 of these in just 1 minute. What kind of fruit was he slicing? Guy Benson.
Watermelon.
Oh, you're decisive on that. I think you may know the answer. Let's see if you do. To the tape.
Oh, my goodness.
Wow.
What is he doing?
I think
so
he's
nerve-wracking.
cutting a watermelon.
Dangerously.
Is that Maury Povich? That looks like Maury.
Looks like
I'm really
this is
thrilled.
the second gig.
I mean, my first reaction is I'm relieved that I didn't kill myself, and the second is that I'm exhilarated.
Okay.
Wow, you are an esoteric sports fan. You just knew that. You weren't even guessing. Question 2. I don't think it was Maury Povich. Just to clarify, it was not Maury Povich. Who I love.
You are not the father.
This is a multiple choice question. Here it is. Online shopping has, of course, caused many brick and mortar stores to close. As of this week, which popular business from the 80s and 90s has exactly 1 store left in the U.S.? Is it A, Tower Records? Is it B, Blockbuster Video? Is it C, Circuit City?
I'm not going to risk losing a point here. I don't know.
Katie Pavlich.
B.
Blockbuster. Is it? You're just guessing.
Yeah.
Will she be rewarded for rolling the dice? To the tape.
Alaska's final 2 Blockbuster video stores will rent out their last movies and close up shop. The 2 closures in Anchorage and Fairbanks will leave the Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon as the last store standing.
Fortune favors the bold. Knowing that you could have wound up with a -1, you did it anyway to regain the position of parity, a tie with Guy Benson. Question 3. It will not be a tie when this is done. A Bloomberg index that calculates the net worth of billionaires says there is a new richest man in the world, in world history actually. He's worth $150 billion. He's also the 25th largest landowner in this country. Who is it? Katie Pavlich.
Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos. Wow, another decisive answer. Is it, in fact, Jeff Bezos?
Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos is now the richest man in modern history. His net worth topped $150 billion.
I suspect that Mr. Bezos can live on the interest on the interest on the interest on the interest from his $150 billion, but I digress.
It's funny, given what he pays his employees, you'd never know he was rich.
Washington Post,
Yeah,
right?
not a generous man. Okay, good answer though. 2-1. Katie Pavlich. Question 4. Guy, this is your chance. The rain came down hard in Washington on Tuesday, and something a little spooky took place at the White House. At the very moment Trump was speaking to reporters about his Helsinki trip, what happened? Katie.
The lights went out.
The lights went out. Is that true? To the tape.
Intelligence agencies. I have a full faith in our intelligence agencies. Whoops, they just turned off the light. That must be the intelligence agencies. There it goes. Okay. You guys okay? Good. That was strange. But that's okay.
Another helping of deep state, anyone?
Suspicious, anyone?
Suspicious?
The Capitol Dome got struck by lightning, too.
That was kind of amazing. Did it really?
Yeah.
Yikes.
Too bad that
we just
wasn't a
paid to get
question.
that fixed, too.
Okay, so it's 3-2, so conceivably we could wind up with a tie.
I think it's 3-1.
3-1, Rob.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I'm not good at math. We're going to move into the final question here. House Speaker Paul Ryan says he has not been able to drive lately because some animals ate his truck. What type of animals ate his truck? Katie.
Woodchucks.
Woodchucks. Seriously?
Yes, seriously.
To the tape.
So I towed it into the dealer. They put it up, and they realized that a family of woodchucks lived in the underbody of my Suburban. They ate all the wiring out of it.
Raccoons.
Oh, wow. And so
Good guess.
my car was eaten by animals.
How would you know that?
Well, I know that's because I listened to that, but I also, growing up, we took the car to the dealership and there was a squirrel in the engine.
But not a woodchuck.
Not a woodchuck.
And you
but
guessed
similar
woodchuck.
situation, but I guessed woodchuck. But I knew that answer.
Huh. One of the more esoteric of our suburban forest animals.
Yes. They're not raccoons.
Amazing.
Raccoons are
Amazing.
brutal.
Katie Pavlich, you're an unstoppable force. Guy, you got one off of her, which is better than I could have done.
To be fair, the only reason I have this gig is because of Guy, apparently. So thank you.
That was amazing. All right, I don't know how many of our Eric Wemple surprise face mugs you have. We're giving you another for a full dinner set.
I'm going to have brunch with all of these mugs, so we never
you should
forget
invite Eric.
this moment. We should.
He's a great
You're
dinner
more
guest.
than welcome.
Thank you both. Guy Benson, thank you.
Good game,
You're a
Guy.
great man.
Thank you for
Katie,
the
you're a total
challenge.
star. More final exam next week. You've got 7 days to pay close attention to the news to see if you can beat our news professionals. We'll be right back.